Okay then, so we need to solve the problem of a user having to scroll to the top of the page to see their score after they click on submit, because that behavior is not really obvious. They might not know that they have to do that. So we need to figure out a way to automatically scroll the user to the top when they click on submit so that they can see their score. So to do that, we're going to have to use a method stored on the window object. So I thought this was a good opportunity to also talk about the window object a little bit as well. So what is the window object then? Well, it's the global object in front-end JavaScript. It's the mother of all objects. And pretty much everything we do for front-end JavaScript is ultimately stored on this window object. So we can see this by typing it out in the console window, then press enter, and we get this object. Now, if we expand this, you're going to see an absolute shed load of different methods and properties on this window object. Like I said, pretty much everything you do in front-end JavaScript is ultimately stored on this window object. So for example, I could use a property called outer width, and that's going to get me the outer width of the window. You can see this right here, which is in pixels. Now, if I make this a bit bigger and do the same thing, then we're going to get a bigger value. So that's one of the properties on the window object. Now, when we use a property or method from the window object, we don't actually have to write out window dot. It's inferred because it's the global object. So I could just say, if I wanted to, outer width and press enter, and that gets me the outer width as well. I don't need to say window dot outer width. So let's have a look at a few examples of this in action. I'm going to go back to the code over here and come down. I've already written a comment, say window object, and underneath what I'm going to do is first of all say console.log, something you've seen many times before, and then say hello. Now what happens when we do this? Well, it logs out hello to the browser. Now this console thing right here, this is stored on the window object. So this is the same as saying window.console.log and then hello. And I can demo that by testing this, save it, and come over here and we see that twice. So like I said, we don't need to type out the window because it's automatically inferred because it's on the global object. So that's why whenever we console.log, we don't write out window. We just do console.log like that. Okay? So let's comment that out and do another example. Something else we've seen is document.query selector and then selecting something, for example, the form. Now, if we log this to the console, so we'll say console.log and close that off at the end, we should see this form element in the console, which we do. Now, this thing right here, this document object, this is also stored on the window object. So this is the same as saying, for example, console.log and then window.document.query selector and then the form. This is exactly the same. If I save it, we still get the same result over here. But again, window is inferred because it's the global object and document is stored on that. So we don't have to write out window. Okay, so let's comment that out. One more example. We saw at the very start of this whole course, we used a function called alert. And what that does is make a little alert pop up on the screen. So I could say alert hello and then save this and it's going to do that pop up for us right there. Now I could do the same thing by saying window.alert and then hello, because the alert function right here is stored on the window object. So if I comment out the first one and save it, this is still going to work. But again, we don't need to write out window because its presence is inferred. So whenever you see any kind of method or property directly, like console or document or alert, they are ultimately stored on the window object. It's just that we don't need to write it out explicitly. Okay, so let's have a look at one more method called setTimeout. This is a method stored on the window object. So just as easily, we could say window.setTimeout, but we're not going to do that. We don't need to. So what setTimeout does is it takes a callback function, which will be an arrow function, and it fires this function after a certain amount of time. Now we specified that amount of time as a second argument, so we could pass in, for example, 3000, and this is milliseconds, which is 3 seconds. So what this will do is when the page loads, it will count to 3 seconds, then perform this function. So then I could say alert and hello ninjas, like so, and save it. So when the page loads, it will wait 3 seconds, then throw up the alert. So that's what setTimeout does, and that is a method on the window object. So then, the method that we're going to use to scroll a user up to the top once they click on submit is called scroll_to. So we want to do this up here after we've done this stuff. So we want to scroll them to the top, or rather we'll do it before we output it. So we scroll them to the top and then we output the score. And we could say window.scroll_to like this, but we don't need to write window because its presence is inferred. So we'll take that off. And then this takes in 2 arguments, an X coordinate and a Y coordinate. We want to take them to the very top. So we'll say 0, 0 for both. So if I save this now and come over here, we'll fill out a few of these different questions and then click on submit, and now it takes us directly to the top and we can see that score right there. So that's awesome. We've used the scroll_to method on the window object to do this. Now this is good, but I'd like to do one more thing. I'd like to maybe animate this value right here so that it counts up and we can see that live. So we'll do that in the next video.